On January 26, 1700, something happened off the coast of North America that nobody recorded at the time. Not because it was small, but because the people who could have recorded it were gone. Their homes were destroyed, their villages were swept away, and the land they had lived on for generations simply disappeared beneath their feet. That day, the Cascadia Subduction Zone, a 700-mile-long fault stretching from Northern California all the way up to British Columbia, ruptured in a magnitude 9.0 earthquake. The ground shook for nearly 5 minutes. The coastline dropped by several feet, and a massive tsunami wave crossed the entire Pacific Ocean, striking Japan with enough force to be recorded in their historical documents. The Japanese called it an orphan tsunami, a wave that arrived with no earthquake to warn them. They had no idea that the source was 5,000 miles away, on the other side of the ocean. It wasn't until modern scientists, using tree ring data, geological evidence, and those Japanese records, pieced together what actually happened on that winter morning in 1700. Now, fast forward to today. It has been over 325 years since that last major rupture, and scientists now believe the Cascadia Subduction Zone is capable of producing the exact same event, at any moment. Not if, when. Right now, as you are watching this video, stress is building along one of the most dangerous fault systems on planet Earth. The Pacific Northwest, home to over 14 million people, is sitting on a geological ticking clock. And the question is no longer whether a magnitude 9.0 earthquake will strike the west coast of North America. The question is how soon and how prepared we are when it happens. Today, we are going to break down everything you need to know about this threat. We'll explore the science behind the Cascadia Subduction Zone, what a 9.0 earthquake would actually do to the region, what governments and emergency managers are doing to prepare, and most importantly, what you can do to survive. This is not a Hollywood movie. This is not fear-mongering. This is the most serious natural disaster threat facing North America. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why. Let's get into it. Before we talk about the earthquake itself, we need to understand why the Cascadia Subduction Zone is so different from other faults you've heard about, and why that difference makes it so much more dangerous. Most people have heard of the San Andreas Fault in California, and that's a dangerous fault, no question about it. But the San Andreas is what geologists call a strike-slip fault. That means two tectonic plates are sliding past each other horizontally. When they slip, the ground moves sideways. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is completely different. It is what scientists call a subduction zone. And subduction zones are where the most powerful earthquakes on Earth occur. Here's how it works. The Earth's crust is made up of massive tectonic plates that are constantly moving. Under the Pacific Ocean, there's a plate called the Juan de Fuca plate. It's moving eastward, toward the North American continent. And beneath the west coast, that plate is doing something incredibly significant. The Juan de Fuca plate is colliding with the North American plate, and instead of sliding past it, it's diving beneath it. It's being forced downward into the Earth's mantle, where temperatures are hot enough to melt rock. This collision zone, where one plate is being pushed beneath another, is called a subduction zone, and the fault itself, where the two plates are locked together, is called a megathrust. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is a megathrust fault stretching approximately 700 miles, from Cape Mendocino in Northern California, past the coastlines of Oregon and Washington, all the way up to Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And for over 325 years, these two plates have been locked together. They are stuck. They can't slide past each other because of friction. But the Juan de Fuca plate keeps trying to move eastward. It keeps pushing. It keeps grinding. Every single day, stress builds along this locked fault. Every single year, more and more energy accumulates. It's like pulling back a rubber band and holding it. The longer you hold it, the more energy is stored. And eventually, the rubber band either breaks or slips. When the Cascadia Subduction Zone finally slips, when that accumulated stress exceeds the strength of the rocks holding it in place, it will release all of that energy at once. And the result will be a megathrust earthquake of magnitude 9.0 or greater. Now, let me put that number into perspective for you. Because I think a lot of people hear 9.0 and think it's just a bigger number than 7.0, but the magnitude scale is logarithmic, not linear. That means each whole number increase on the scale represents a 10-fold increase in ground shaking, and approximately 32 times more energy released. A magnitude 9.0 earthquake releases energy equivalent to approximately 475 million tons of TNT detonating simultaneously. That's more than 100,000 times the energy of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. That's enough energy to ring the entire planet like a bell, enough energy to shift the Earth's rotation, enough energy to permanently change the coastline. This is not just another earthquake. This is a planet-shaking event. When a subduction zone megathrust earthquake occurs, the fault slips, sometimes by 20 to 30 meters or 60 to 100 feet. The ground on the western side of the fault moves upward and seaward. The coast drops, and the ocean above it is displaced, creating a massive tsunami. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake that killed over 227,000 people, that was a magnitude 9.1 earthquake on a subduction zone. The 2011 Tohoku earthquake in Japan that caused the Fukushima nuclear disaster, that was a magnitude 9.0 earthquake on a subduction zone. The Cascadia Subduction Zone is capable of producing an earthquake at least as powerful as both of those events, and it's been building stress for more than 3 times as long as those faults were. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is not a worst-case fantasy. This is a geological inevitability, and it's been building for over 3 centuries. Let me take you back to January 1700. There were no European settlers on the west coast of North America at that time, but there were indigenous peoples, the ancestors of the modern-day tribes of the Pacific Northwest. They lived in villages along the coast, fishing the rivers, hunting in the forests, and living in harmony with the land. That winter, something changed. It was a cold night. The ground began to shake, not gently, violently. The shaking was so intense that people could not stand. Homes collapsed. The earth cracked open. And then, within minutes, the shaking stopped. But that wasn't the end. 15 to 20 minutes after the shaking stopped, the water retreated. The ocean pulled back from the shore, farther than anyone had ever seen. And then the wave came. A wall of water, tens of feet high, slammed into the coast, washing away everything in its path. There were no records of this event in North America, no written accounts, no European chroniclers. The only reason we know exactly when it happened is because of a connection made centuries later. In Japan, in the winter of 1700, fishermen and villagers along the eastern coast experienced something strange. A tsunami wave struck their shores. But there was no earthquake that preceded it, no shaking, no warning, no reason for the wave to have arrived. They called it an orphan tsunami, and they recorded the date in their historical documents. It wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that scientists put the pieces together. By studying tree ring data from dead trees along the Pacific Northwest coast, they found evidence of a massive earthquake that had occurred in the winter of 1699 to 1700. These trees had been killed when the ground dropped, flooding their roots with salt water. And by matching the exact timing with the Japanese records of an orphan tsunami, they pinpointed the date, January 26, 1700. At approximately 9:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's when the Cascadia Subduction Zone last ruptured. Now, here's the critical part. Scientists have studied the geological record of the Cascadia Subduction Zone extensively. They have found evidence of previous major earthquakes going back thousands of years, and the pattern shows that the fault ruptures in massive events, full margin ruptures of magnitude, 9.0 or greater, roughly every 300 to 500 years. The gap between the last major earthquake and today is now over 325 years. We have already passed the lower end of that average interval. We are now firmly within the window where another major rupture is possible at any time. This is not a prediction. Scientists cannot predict earthquakes. We cannot say it will happen on this date at this time. But we can say, with very high confidence, that the Cascadia Subduction Zone is in a state of high stress, and that the probability of a major earthquake in the coming decades is significant. According to the USGS and FEMA, there's a 16% to 22% probability of a full margin magnitude 9.0 rupture in the next 50 years. There's a 37% to 43% probability of a magnitude 8.0 to 8.6 event in the next 50 years. To put that in perspective, a 16% to 22% chance in the next 50 years is roughly the same probability that California has of experiencing a major earthquake on the San Andreas Fault. And emergency managers in California have been preparing for that scenario for decades. The Pacific Northwest is only just beginning to fully grapple with the scale of the threat. Now that we understand the science and the history, let's talk about what actually happens when a 9.0 earthquake strikes the West Coast. And I want to be completely transparent with you. The projections are devastating. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has conducted extensive modeling of a magnitude 9.0 earthquake on the Cascadia Subduction Zone. Their estimates are sobering, and I'm going to share them with you directly. According to FEMA, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake on the Cascadia Fault would kill an estimated 14,000 people in Oregon and Washington alone. That's just the immediate death toll from the earthquake itself, not counting the tsunami, not counting secondary effects like fires, disease, or lack of medical care. The economic losses would be staggering. FEMA estimates the damage to infrastructure, homes, and businesses would exceed $200 billion, and that's a conservative estimate. Other studies have placed the figure closer to $300 to $400 billion. Let me walk you through the disaster phase by phase, because this is where the reality of the situation really sets in. Phase 1, the earthquake. When the Cascadia Subduction Zone ruptures, the shaking will last anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. That may not sound like a long time, but try to imagine standing during 5 minutes of violent shaking. You won't be able to keep your feet. You'll be thrown to the ground. Buildings will sway. Furniture will slide. everything that isn't bolted down will be in motion. Scientists who have studied past subduction zone earthquakes describe the shaking as beyond anything most people can imagine. It is not a quick jolt. It is a sustained, violent, rolling motion that feels like the world is ending. Phase 2. The tsunami. The earthquake is only the opening act. Approximately 15 to 20 minutes after the ground stops shaking, the first tsunami wave will hit the coast. Moving at speeds exceeding 40 miles per hour, the wave will make landfall on the outer coasts of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. Heights are projected to be 20 to 60 feet in many areas, with some estimates suggesting waves could exceed 80 feet in narrow inlets and bays. There are dozens of coastal communities in the Pacific Northwest with no high ground. Some are built on low-lying land that has virtually no escape route. Washington State's Emergency Management Division has identified numerous towns where the only potential evacuation route is blocked by the tsunami itself. Coastal communities like Seaside, Oregon, and Ocean Shores, Washington, face near total destruction. And here's the cruel part. The first wave won't be the only one. Tsunami waves can continue arriving for up to 12 hours after the initial earthquake. The second and third waves are sometimes larger than the first. If you live near the coast and you don't get to high ground within 15 minutes of the shaking stopping, you have a very low chance of survival. Phase 3. The aftermath. The earthquake and tsunami are over within hours. The aftermath will last for months, if not years. The Washington State Geological Survey has modeled the impacts of a Cascadia earthquake, and the data is difficult to process. Tens of thousands of households displaced. Over 1,300 public schools damaged or destroyed. More than 70 fire stations inoperable. Major highways and bridges severely damaged, including the I-5 corridor, which cuts the state in half. Mainline rail routes and ports damaged or destroyed. Electrical power outages extending for months. Disruption of water and sewer systems. Cascading failures in medical, transportation, and financial systems. Economic disruption on a scale the country has never seen. The I-5 freeway, the lifeline that connects Oregon and Washington to the rest of the country, will be impassable. Bridges over the Columbia River could collapse. Without those bridges, there's no way to move supplies from the south to the north or from the north to the south. Robert Ezell, the director of Washington State's Emergency Management Division, has publicly stated that this would be the worst natural disaster in our country's history. Not one of the worst, the worst. FEMA and state officials across the Pacific Northwest have been preparing for this scenario for years, but the scale of the event is so enormous that they acknowledge it will overwhelm every available resource. Now, this is the part you need to pay close attention to. County emergency officials in Oregon and Washington say residents need to prepare for 2 weeks of self-sufficiency. Not 24 hours, not 3 days, 2 weeks. That means you need enough food, water, medication, and essential supplies to survive for 14 days without electricity, without water from the tap, without gas, without internet, and without assistance from emergency services. They will not be able to reach you. The roads will be impassable. The airports will be damaged. The ports will be destroyed. Dan Ungard, a scientist with the Washington State Geological Survey who published a major tsunami study, put it this way. Where do you live? Where you work? Where are the places you frequent most in your daily life? We want to draw people's attention to that, because that is where you will be when this happens. What we're pushing for, more than anything, is personal preparedness. I want to pause here and let that sink in. The tsunami risk is so significant that state officials have been distributing maps showing evacuation routes, not because they want to scare people, but because they have a moral obligation to tell people the truth. The state attorney general has said that the tsunami mapping is a public necessity. People need to know that there is a very real possibility of being killed by a tsunami in the Pacific Northwest. If you live or plan to visit anywhere along the Pacific Northwest coastline, you should know where the nearest tsunami evacuation route is located. You should know where the high ground is, because you won't have time to look it up when the earthquake starts. You'll have 15 minutes to get to safety. And in a disaster of this scale, 15 minutes is less than it sounds. Now, at this point, some of you might be wondering, I live in California. Should I be worried about a magnitude 9.0 earthquake? The short answer is yes and no. Let me explain. The San Andreas Fault in California is a strike-slip fault. The two plates slide past each other horizontally. A strike-slip fault cannot produce a magnitude 9.0 earthquake. The maximum possible earthquake on the southern San Andreas is around magnitude 8.0. That's still devastating, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as a subduction zone megathrust event. A magnitude 8.0 earthquake releases approximately 32 times less energy than a magnitude 9.0. So, while California's earthquake threat is real and significant, it is not the same scale as what the Pacific Northwest faces. However, there's a different threat in California that is getting serious attention right now, and it ties directly into the broader West Coast earthquake risk conversation. In recent days, 2 moderate earthquakes struck Southern California. A magnitude 4.1 on Sunday, followed by a magnitude 4.3 on Monday, both in the exact same location. The location? Right at the junction where the Garlock Fault meets the San Andreas Fault, just 70 miles north of Los Angeles. The Garlock Fault is a significant fault in its own right. It runs east-west, cutting across the state of California, and it hasn't had a major rupture in at least 500 years, possibly as long as 1,000 years. That means an enormous amount of stress has been building along this fault for centuries. Geophysicist Stephen Burns, who has been monitoring activity in the region, called this significant. He said, "We already know that the Garlock is locked and loaded for a big rupture. Could be magnitude 7 or higher, magnitude 7.5 or greater even. Now, here's the nightmare scenario that has seismologists concerned. Back in 2019, a magnitude 6.4 foreshock struck near Ridgecrest, California, followed the next day by a magnitude 7.1 earthquake, the strongest to hit California in over 2 decades. That sequence didn't just shake the ground, it changed the stress distribution across the entire region. According to USGS calculations, the Ridgecrest sequence increased the accumulated stress on the Garlock Fault by approximately 30%. That means a fault that was already overdue for a major rupture was pushed even closer to its breaking point. But there's another, more recent development that has scientists even more concerned. In June 2026, a research team led by Lilian Burkhardt from the University of Hawaii published a study in the Journal of Geophysical Research, Solid Earth. Their findings were alarming. The study concluded that the San Andreas fault system in Southern California has reached its highest stress level in the past 1,000 years. Not 100 years, not 200 years, 1,000 years. Dr. Burkhardt said directly, "Because it has been such a long time since either fault system has had a major earthquake, the accumulated stress is enormous. Right now, with stress at historically high levels across the region, and more than 160 years having elapsed since the last major rupture, the system is in a critically loaded state." Now, combine that with what we know about the Cajun Pass, a geographical junction where the San Andreas and San Jacinto fault systems meet. The researchers identified Cajun Pass as what they call an earthquake gate. Under certain conditions, an earthquake rupturing along the San Andreas Fault could travel through Cajun Pass and jump onto the San Jacinto Fault, turning what would have been a single fault event into a multi-fault rupture. A joint rupture crossing Cajun Pass, according to the study, could produce an earthquake between magnitude 7.4 and 7.8, affecting not just a corridor along one fault, but simultaneously threatening the Los Angeles Basin, San Bernardino, Riverside County, and the Coachella Valley. That's approximately 24 million people who would be affected by a single event. Previous studies have concluded there is a 99% chance of a major earthquake stronger than magnitude 6.7 striking California by the year 2043. Not a 99% chance in the next 100 years, by 2043, which is less than 20 years from the time this video was produced. USC seismologist Ahmed Elbana, director of the statewide California Earthquake Center, put it this way when asked when the next big event might come. It could be today, tomorrow, in 10 years, or in 30 years. On geological timescales, there is no meaningful difference between those options. And if that sounds abstract, let me give you the human impact projections that the USGS has produced. Hundreds of deaths, tens of thousands of injuries, approximately 300 deaths and 24,000 injuries in Los Angeles alone in one scenario, and $200 billion in damages in the Los Angeles metropolitan area. So, while California won't experience a magnitude 9.0 earthquake on the San Andreas, the combination of the Garlock Fault, the southern San Andreas, and the San Jacinto Fault, all at historically high stress levels, creates a significant and growing threat. And what's particularly concerning is that both the Cascadia Subduction Zone and the California fault systems are now showing signs of elevated stress simultaneously. This is not a time to be complacent. The entire West Coast is under an elevated earthquake threat, and the scientific community is unified on this point. It's not a matter of if a major earthquake strikes, it's a matter of when and how prepared we are. So, what's being done? How are we preparing for these inevitable events? And is there any technology that can give people a warning before the shaking starts? The USGS has developed the Shake Alert Earthquake Early Warning System, which currently operates across California, Oregon, and Washington. It is the most advanced public earthquake warning system in the United States, and it has the potential to save thousands of lives. Here's how it works. When an earthquake occurs, the rupture generates 2 types of seismic waves that radiate outward from the epicenter. P waves travel fast, about 3 to 5 miles per second, and cause little damage. Think of them as the advance warning party. S waves travel slower but carry the violent shaking energy that causes building damage, structural failure, and casualties. The S waves are what you actually feel when the ground shakes violently. Shake Alert works by using a network of seismic sensors to detect the P waves the moment they are generated. The system calculates the earthquake's location and magnitude based on the P wave data, and then it generates an alert and transmits it via mobile networks before the destructive S waves arrive. This gives people in automated systems anywhere from seconds to tens of seconds of warning before the strong shaking hits. Now, that may not sound like much, but in an earthquake, even a few seconds of warning can be the difference between life and death. People can drop, cover, and hold on under a desk or table. Surgeons can pause critical procedures in hospitals. Trains can begin emergency braking before reaching bridges or tunnels. Elevators can stop at the nearest floor and open their doors. Industrial equipment can power down safely. Someone on a freeway can slow their vehicle and move to the shoulder. In California, Shake Alert already integrates with public transportation systems, schools, hospitals, and industrial facilities. When the system detects a significant earthquake, it can automatically trigger actions like slowing trains, opening fire station doors, and pausing medical equipment. The Shake Alert network currently has more than 3,800 seismic sensors across the West Coast. The goal is to have 1,975 stations operational by the end of 2025. When fully built out, the system will provide real-time earthquake detection for the entire West Coast. The system now protects over 50 million people across California, Oregon, and Washington. In 2025, the USGS published a detailed report outlining a $66 million expansion plan to bring Shake Alert to Alaska, where earthquake risk is also extremely high. Alerts are delivered through several channels. Wireless emergency alerts sent to all mobile phones in the affected area, the MyShake app, a free app available for iOS and Android. Android's built-in earthquake alert feature automatically enabled on most newer Android devices, public address systems at universities, hospitals, schools, and transit systems, and automated industrial systems with direct integration to infrastructure control systems. And here's the crucial thing you need to understand. The alert is useless if you don't know what to do when it arrives. Every Shake Alert message includes the instruction, drop, cover, and hold on. But if you've never practiced this, if you don't know instinctively what to do, you'll panic, and panic kills. Let me be clear about what that means. Drop down to your hands and knees immediately. This prevents you from being knocked over by the shaking, and it keeps you low so you can crawl if needed. Cover your head and neck with one arm, and if possible, get under a sturdy table or desk. If there's no furniture to get under, get down next to an interior wall, away from windows and tall objects that could fall. Hold on until the shaking stops. If you're under a table, hold onto its leg with one hand. The table may move, and you want to stay under it. This is not just something you raid once and forget. It's something you need to practice. Schools in earthquake-prone areas conduct drills. Families should practice at home. Because when the ground starts shaking, your brain will not have time to process complicated instructions. Muscle memory takes over. If you've practiced, you'll drop, cover, and hold on without thinking. If you haven't, you'll freeze. One of the interesting things about the Shake Alert system is that social scientists have been deeply involved in its development. They've studied how people react to alerts, what phrasing is most effective, and how to design messages that provoke action rather than confusion. It's not just an engineering project, it's a human behavior project. The bottom line is this: earthquake early warning will save lives. It already has. During the 2019 Ridgecrest earthquake sequence, the system performed well. During the 2026 events we've been discussing, the system triggered alerts that reach tens of millions of people. As the sensor network grows and the algorithms improve, it will only become more effective. If you live on the West Coast, I strongly encourage you to download the MyShake app right now. It's free, it works, and it might just save your life. All right, we've covered the science, we've covered the history, we've covered the devastation, we've covered the warning systems. Now it's time to talk about what you can actually do to protect yourself and your family. I want you to understand something very clearly. Preparedness is not fear. It is the opposite of fear. Fear is feeling powerless and overwhelmed. Preparedness is taking control of what you can control. And there is a lot you can control. First, have at least 72 hours of emergency supplies. County emergency managers say you need to be self-sufficient for 2 weeks after the earthquake. But if 2 weeks feels overwhelming, start with 72 hours. That's 3 days of essential supplies. Water, 1 gallon per person per day. Minimum 3 days. That's 3 gallons per person. For a family of 4, that's 12 gallons of stored water. It takes space, but it's essential. Food, non-perishable, no-cook food. Think canned beans, granola bars, peanut butter, dried fruit, and ready-to-eat meals. Remember to include a manual can opener. First aid kit, bandages, antiseptic, pain relievers, prescription medications, and any medical supplies you or your family need. flashlights, and batteries, not candles. Candles can start fires after an earthquake when gas lines may be broken. Radio, battery-powered or hand-crank radio so you can receive emergency broadcasts when the power is out. Phone charger, portable battery pack, and solar charger if possible. You'll need to communicate with loved ones. Cash, ATMs, and credit card readers will not work after a major earthquake. Important documents, copies of IDs, insurance policies, medical records, and birth certificates in a waterproof container. Second, secure your home. The ground shaking causes more injuries from falling objects than from building collapse. Strap your water heater to the wall. If it falls over and breaks a gas line, it can start a fire. This is one of the most important things you can do. Bolt heavy furniture to wall studs, bookcases, cabinets, and tall shelves. Secure heavy items on shelves. Use museum putty or brackets to prevent them from falling. Move heavy objects to lower shelves. If you have to choose between a book falling from the top shelf versus the bottom shelf, you want it coming from the bottom. Know how to shut off your gas meter and water main. You may need to do this if you smell gas after the earthquake. Third, know where to shelter during shaking. The safest place during an earthquake is under a sturdy table or desk, away from windows, away from tall bookcases, and away from anything that could fall on you. If you're inside, stay inside. Running outside during shaking is dangerous because of falling debris, broken glass, and collapsing facades. If you're in a bed, stay there and cover your head with a pillow. Don't try to run to another room. If you're in a car, pull over to the side of the road, set the parking brake, and stay inside. Avoid bridges, overpasses, and power lines. Fourth, have a communication plan. After a major earthquake, phone networks will be overwhelmed. Calls may not go through, but text messages often get through more reliably because they use less bandwidth. Choose an out-of-area contact that everyone in your family can call or text to check in. Text, don't call. It's more likely to succeed. Agree on a meeting point if you get separated. Choose one location near your home and one outside of your neighborhood. Keep emergency contact information in your phone and on paper. Fifth, if you live near the coast, know your tsunami evacuation route. This is specifically for people living or traveling in coastal areas of Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. Know where the nearest high ground is. Local governments have posted maps showing tsunami evacuation zones and routes. Practice walking to high ground. In a tsunami, you'll have 15 to 20 minutes to get to safety. That's not a lot of time. You need to know the way without thinking. Plan multiple routes. Bridges may be damaged or impassable. County emergency managers say many people assume they'll have time to gather belongings and make decisions. You won't. The earthquake is your warning. The moment the shaking stops, you need to move. Sixth, prepare for 2 weeks of self-sufficiency. I want to repeat this because it's so important. After the earthquake, there will be no help for at least 2 weeks. No emergency services will reach you. No rescue teams, no helicopters, no food distribution. The roads will be impassable. The airports will be damaged. The ports will be destroyed. FEMA will not be there for days. The National Guard will not be there for days. You are your own first responder. Here's a quick checklist of what to have ready before the earthquake. 3 or more days of water at 1 gallon per person per day, non-perishable food, a first aid kit with medications, flashlights and extra batteries, a battery-powered or hand-crank radio, a portable phone charger, cash and small bills, important documents in a waterproof container, water heater strapped to wall, furniture bolted to walls, a communication plan with family, knowledge of evacuation routes if you're in a coastal area, and practice of drop, cover, and hold on. Take a screenshot of this list right now, send it to your family, share it on social media. Because the more people who are prepared, the more people will survive, and the faster the region will recover. Let's bring everything together. We know, based on centuries of geological evidence, that the Cascadia Subduction Zone is capable of producing a magnitude 9.0 earthquake. It has done so before, on January 26, 1700, and it will do so again. We know that a full margin rupture has a 16% to 22% chance of occurring in the next 50 years. That's not a remote possibility, that's a significant probability. It's roughly the same as the chance of a major earthquake on the San Andreas Fault in California. And Californians have been preparing for that scenario for decades. We know that FEMA projects approximately 14,000 deaths in Oregon and Washington from a Cascadia earthquake. And that doesn't include tsunami deaths. It doesn't include secondary effects like fires, disease, or lack of medical care. The actual death toll could be significantly higher. And we know that California is not exempt from this broader West Coast threat. The Garlock Fault, the Southern San Andreas, and the San Jacinto Fault are all at historically high stress levels. A joint multi-fault rupture could affect up to 24 million people. We know that earthquake early warning works. Shake Alert can give you seconds to tens of seconds of warning before the shaking starts. That warning can save your life, but only if you know what to do when you receive it. And we know that preparedness is not fear. It is empowerment. It is taking control of what you can control. It is understanding the threat and making a plan to survive it. It is having the supplies you need so that you aren't dependent on a government that won't be able to reach you for at least 2 weeks. The big one is coming. The ground will shake, the water will rise, infrastructure will fail, and people will die. But how many people die and how quickly the region recovers depends entirely on decisions being made today, by governments, by emergency managers, by scientists, by city planners, and by you. So I'll ask you the same question that emergency managers across the Pacific Northwest and California are asking their communities. Are you ready? Do you have a 72-hour emergency kit? Have you strapped your water heater? Do you know your tsunami evacuation route? Have you practiced drop, cover, and hold on? Drop a comment below. Tell me one thing you're going to do this week to prepare. Not tomorrow, not someday, this week. If this video helped you understand the risk, please hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone you care about, someone who lives on the West Coast, someone you love, someone you want to make sure is safe. The more people who understand this threat, the more prepared we will be. And the more prepared we are, the more people will survive. Check out these videos next. California's earthquake risk update and Yellowstone's supervolcano. I'll keep covering these critical stories every single week, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss anything. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe.